Okay, looks like we're on. I'm sorry, I am 2 minutes late, it looks like. So, for any of you who are on right now, we are on week 2 of our intuitive eating study group. And for those of you maybe who have not watched the previous webinar, we discussed the intro and the first chapter of this intuitive eating book. And we basically talked a lot about what the authors and the research shows, how much dieting trends and even disguised dieting trends in the name of healthy lifestyles and all of that can do a lot to make us feel disconnected from our intuitive eating voice, and often fail. 95% of the time at least they fail. And so that chapter is not to be dismal or anything like that, but it's to kind of help us become aware of the research and what statistics show, and that it's not just because 95% of the population lacks willpower or have major character flaws, but it actually is the process of dieting and restricting that catapults many of us into behaviors that cause us to gain weight or gain more weight back, to be obsessive about our food and our body shape and weight, and to feel uncomfortable in settings that have food, and to stuff ourselves constantly and lose touch with just the ability to feel satisfied and enjoy our eating experiences, which food is such an integral part of our lives, that it is an exciting thing to realize that it can actually be a very peaceful part of our lives, and we can peacefully eat and enjoy our food, and get to a point where we feel peaceful about ourselves and our bodies, how unique they are, and learn to love them. And so that's kind of the gist of chapter 1. And I'm going to just jump right in. Oh, and the last thing we talked about, I just gave a little assignment. Maybe some of you were able to do it. And you can even just do it in your mind, but just to think about where you're at and what experiences you have had throughout your life with diets, or any sort of restrictive. I mean, I've been on official diets, and then I had also done different cleanses just for health reasons, and or avoided, sugar, not because it was a diet, but because it was healthier for me and things. And those all had what they call the diet backlash results or symptoms. And so just the assignment was to just take note of the different experiences and decisions you've made that have triggered diet backlash symptoms, as you can look at what those symptoms are, either in the webinar or in the book if you have it. And think about that, and then set a goal and be intentional about what you want to accomplish from this study group. Some of you posted it on the Facebook page, which I loved, and I didn't post mine, but I should say that mine is to just continue on this path. I feel like it is a lifelong journey. There are always life events that come up that can cause us to become off kilter and lose touch with our intuitive signals, and so I feel like it's important for us, even as we are on this journey. And I feel like I'm on, definitely the great, fabulous end, where I've passed all those issues and markers that I had to work through over the years. Well, it didn't take years, but I've been practicing it for several years now. But there are still things that I discover that can be more intuitive, and to kind of bring me back to that center. So to think about where you would like to be, and just be committed to studying these principles in this book. I think a lot of us can look at this and be like, there's no way that I can reach my natural healthy weight by by following principles that are so gentle and so forgiving, and so that revolve around unlimited permission and acceptance and things like that. And so it can be a very new psychological theory. And so I just encourage you to study it out and study through the whole thing, and start trying to implement these principles as we work through them, and be patient. Learn to kind of take it a little slower than you're used to when you're ready to just do a quick diet and lose weight really fast. We're talking about something that can have the potential to change your life in many ways, many positive ways, not just with weight and food, and also and just be long term. That the thing that I love most about having gone through this process is that I never, for the rest of my life, and I know for a fact and just feel it 100%, I will never worry about weight gain again. I will never worry about what I'm eating again or have food anxiety. And so that's a really exciting place to be. If you heard my story, it feels so amazing. And so anyway, I encourage you to look into it and commit to studying these and trying them out. Okay, so chapter 2, we have this is all about your eating personalities, and I love how they've kind of put this together because I think we just all are unique in what our relationship with food is. There's lots of different triggers and things that can stimulate that. It also has to do with our own just intrinsic personalities. But there's a little chart here in the book. If you're following along the webinar and you have your book with you as if it's like a real live book club session, then it's on pages 18 and 19. This is just the summary. It talks in detail about these eating personalities throughout the chapter, but basically they're just encouraging us to discover what kind of eating personality we primarily are and recognize that we can kind of shift between different ones throughout different times of our life. But typically there's always one main one that will come up for you. And so go ahead and look through these. I will read off the summary of eating styles. The first one is the careful eater. And so it has the eating style in this chart, and then it has the trigger for that eater, and then the characteristics. So the careful eater, it's really interesting. Their trigger is actually fitness and health. So that's the one that I felt like I definitely fell into more. And their characteristic is that they appear to be a perfect eater, yet they anguish over each food morsel and its effect on the body. On the surface, this person seems health and fitness oriented. Okay. Then there's the unconscious eater, and their trigger is that they eat while doing something else at the same time. How familiar does that sound? This person is often unaware that she or he is eating or how much is being eaten. To sit down and simply eat is often viewed as a waste of time. Eating is usually paired with another activity to be productive, and there are many subtypes of the unconscious eater that you'll see. The chaotic unconscious eater, which has a very overscheduled life, and this person's eating style is haphazard. They gulp and go when the food is available, and they seem to thrive on tension. Okay, now just to remind you that as we go through these, none of this is of judgment or to make you feel guilty or anything like that. This is what you call, what are they? A lot of times in therapy they talk about mindfulness and being a non-judgmental observer of yourself and of your internal environment. So pay attention to be that non-judgmental observer as you're looking through these. Okay, the refuse not unconscious eater. This person, or their trigger, is the mere presence of food. Okay, and this person is especially vulnerable to candy jars or food present in meetings or sitting openly on the kitchen counter. Then there is the waste not unconscious eater, and their trigger is free food. So this person's eating drive is often influenced by the value of the food dollar and is susceptible to all-you-can-eat buffets and free food. Then there is the emotional unconscious eater, and their trigger is uncomfortable emotions. Their characteristic is stress or uncomfortable feelings trigger eating, especially when they are alone. Now that's one that I definitely had paired with the careful eater personality in my personal experience, but you can usually pick out a little bit of each of these. What I think is also important to note is I feel like emotional unconscious eaters don't always necessarily eat when they just have negative emotions going on. It can often be an exciting type emotion. Then there is the professional dieter, and their trigger is feeling fat, and this person is perpetually dieting, often trying the latest commercial diet or diet book. And then the intuitive eater, and that's where this all culminates, is we learn about what the intuitive eater looks like. Their trigger for eating, get this, is biological hunger. And their characteristic is that this person makes food choices without experiencing guilt or an ethical dilemma. They honor their hunger, they respect their fullness, and they enjoy the pleasure of eating. Okay, so that's our goal. That is why we want to study these principles and start implementing them, as we are working towards becoming an intuitive eater, and there are different levels of that. But there's a great little quiz that you can take in the back of this book. It's only like 10 or 15 questions. And this is all to help you see where you're at and to kind of score whether or not you are an intuitive eater. So the first yes or no question is whether or not you give yourself unconditional permission to eat. So they say, number one, I try to avoid certain foods high in fat, carbs, or calories. Number two, if I am craving a certain food, I don't allow myself to have it. Number three, and these are all answered yes or no, I follow eating rules of diet plans that dictate what, when, and or how to eat. Number four, I get mad at myself for eating something unhealthy. And number five, I have forbidden foods that I don't allow myself to eat. Obviously, if you answer yes to these, then that is points towards not being an intuitive eater and being kind of out of touch with yourself. Okay, so eating for emotional rather than physical reasons is the next section. I won't read all of these off, I guess, because maybe what I'll do is I'll post them on the Facebook group page. But this is a great little quiz to take, and this is just as our start and foundation to assess where you're at. So again, look at those eating personalities and take that intuitive eating quiz. And I'm trying to see here how it scores. Oh, so the scoring is each yes statement indicates an area that likely needs some work. The section with the greatest amount of yes responses indicates the area that needs the most attention. Okay, and the three areas were whether or not you give yourself unconditional permission to eat, whether or not you eat for emotional rather than physical reasons, and whether or not you rely on internal hunger or satiety cues. I don't know how to say that word. Is it satiety or satiety? Anyway, you guys can let me know if you want to. Okay, so those are the eating personalities. Hope that's kind of fun for some of you to identify with. And let's go ahead and move on to Chapter 3. So Chapter 3 this is basically your reference chapter as you're working through this book. It's a great chapter to turn back to over and over again because it basically summarizes every principle of intuitive eating. And I think there are, what, 10 principles? There might be 12. No, there's still 10. Okay, so principle number 1 is to reject the diet mentality. And again, in the first chapter, we talked all about why diets don't work and what their effects are on us physically and psychologically. And so the very first step we have to take if we truly want to become and reach that intuitive eater status and the peace and the weight loss and everything that comes with that is to reject the diet mentality. So it says we have to throw out the diet books and magazine articles that offer you the false hope of losing weight quickly, easily, and permanently. And I remember being consumed by those. And it wasn't even my entire life, but I remember every magazine I would walk by and I would see something about, trimming your tummy down or walking off 8 pounds or different diets and things like that. They just caught my attention all the time, and now I look at them and just think they're so silly. Anyway, so get rid of those. Get angry at the lies that have led you to feel as if you were a failure every time a new diet stopped working and you gained back all of that weight. I think that's interesting. They tell you to get angry at the lies. I think sometimes it takes that kind of emotion of admitting that something really is not working. If you allow even one small hope to linger that a new and better diet might be lurking around the corner, it will prevent you from being free to rediscover intuitive eating. And I talked about last time at the end of the last webinar that, and this is totally, again, non-judgmental, but I have observed, even in myself, when I first started this process, the tendency to want to skip ahead to, okay, so what do I eat and what's the nutrition part and what's healthy and how do I lose this weight faster and things like that. And people will get impatient and want to start something else. And I think it's a really key and vital question to ask on this journey from the very beginning is what you want to get out of it. So do you want to ultimately reach that stage of being an intuitive eater, having that peace, losing the excess weight, reaching your natural healthy weight for your body type? Or do you want to give in to the temptation for a quicker, faster way and have to go through that entire painful yo-yo process again that can be as quick as months or even years? And just knowing that first principle, rejecting the diet mentality, is absolutely vital to being able to continue on with these other principles and adopt them fully and not just halfway. And if you do it halfway, it will take so much longer. Let's just put it that way. Okay, principle number 2 is to honor your hunger. Keep your body biologically fed with adequate energy and carbohydrates. Otherwise, you can trigger a primal drive to overeat. Once you reach the moment of excessive hunger, all intentions of moderate conscious eating are fleeting and irrelevant. Learning to honor this first biological signal sets the stage for rebuilding trust with yourself and with food. So the second principle, honoring your hunger. There is a Q&A section in the back of this book that I wanted to point out. If you have the book, I'm sure you've perused and seen all the different things that they have in here. But I did notice one question that popped out to me was, can I lose weight with intuitive eating alone after years of dieting? And they say in here that oftentimes if a person has dieted frequently throughout their life, their biological hunger cues are actually going to be very skewed and out of whack. And so what they recommend is to start off with just feeding your body, even if it's a small amount, every 2, 3, 4 hours. Don't go past that. And as you do that consistently and your body knows that it's going to be getting fed consistently, it can then start showing you what those cues are again and what it feels like to be hungry. And that's a really good feeling to get that reestablished. So, okay, so principle number 3 is to make peace with food. So we're calling a truce. We're stopping the food fight. Give yourself unconditional permission to eat. If you tell yourself that you can't or shouldn't have a particular food, it can lead to intense feelings of deprivation that build into uncontrollable cravings and often binging. When you finally give in to your forbidden foods, eating will be experienced with such intensity it usually results in Last Supper overeating and overwhelming guilt. Yep, anyway, I could talk about each one of these principles and how true they are in my own life and how I've seen such a shift. But it is true. What a lot of people report when they start implementing these principles is that as soon as there's no bad foods list or good foods list, the drive to eat them goes way down. But then also when they do want to eat them, there's not this guilt or shame, and so they don't binge on them. They eat what feels good and satisfying, and then they're done. Okay, number 4, challenge the food police. Scream a loud no to thoughts in your head that declare you're good for eating under 1,000 calories or bad because you ate a piece of chocolate cake. The food police monitor the unreasonable rules that dieting has created. The police station is housed deep in your psyche, and its loudspeaker shouts negative barbs, hopeless phrases, and guilt-provoking indictments. Chasing the food police away is a critical step to returning to intuitive eating. Principle number 5 is to feel your fullness. Listen for the body's signals that tell you that you are no longer hungry. Observe the signs that show you that you're comfortably full. Pause in the middle of a meal or snack and ask yourself how the food tastes and what your current fullness level is. Okay, so that's a really big one as well. Then another section, a chapter that they actually added to this new edition, is all about the different research studies that they now have published about intuitive eating, which is so cool. And so they can back all of these claims up despite, in addition to the thousands of testimonials. But what I thought was interesting is there was a professor from the school I went to, Brigham Young University, who was interviewed on major TV shows or talk shows because he lost his title for his research and in the article that he wrote was BYU professor loses 50 pounds by eating whatever he wants. And it was so cool to read his little story that he had struggled with weight his entire life, had always been trying to diet or try this thing or that to get control, and as soon as he started studying this, it just totally clicked with him. He embraced it and accepted it right away, and he basically just said, whenever I'm hungry, I eat whatever it is that I feel like, what I want. And then, but the key is that he stops when he's full. But he said because he now had permission to eat what it was he wanted, and he started paying attention to how it made him feel and things like that, he was able to respect his fullness so much easier. So anyway, that's kind of how that works. Okay, principle number 6 is discovering the satisfaction factor. The Japanese have the wisdom to keep pleasure as one of their goals of healthy living. In our fury to be thin and healthy, we often overlook one of the most basic gifts of existence, the pleasure and satisfaction that can be found in the eating experience. When you eat what you really want in an environment that is inviting, the pleasure you derive will be a powerful force in helping you feel satisfied and content. By providing this experience for yourself, you will find that it takes much less food to decide you've had enough. And I found this to be true, especially when you've got young children, and I find that I often eat like off the counter after I've dished them up and served my kids, you know, at the table. And I told my husband recently, and this is just again to say how this is a lifelong journey process, but just I've been feeling way less satisfied with my eating experiences because they've often been like what the kids are eating, or just what's quick and fast, and so there's a part of me that starts craving things just to satisfy my palate because I haven't eaten what it is that I really wanted. And then as soon as I make something that really sounds good, it's like, okay, there we go. So discovering the satisfaction factor. Principle number 7, cope with your emotions without using food. Find ways to comfort, nurture, distract, and resolve your emotional issues without using food. Anxiety, loneliness, boredom, and anger are all emotions we experience throughout life. Each has its own trigger, and each has its own appeasement. Food will not fix any of these feelings. It may comfort for the short term, distract from the pain, and even numb you into a food hangover, but food will not solve the problem. If anything, eating for an emotional hunger will only make you feel worse in the long run. You'll ultimately have to deal with the source of the emotion as well as the discomfort of overeating. So what I think is interesting is that if for people that have more of a tendency to use food for emotional reasons, it is amazing how exacerbated that becomes if dieting is in the picture, because now that food is bad and it's craved on top of just the tendency to use it anyways for emotional reasons. And so it just blows up the temptation and the urge to want to binge and stuff ourselves with forbidden foods. And so something that really does help with this issue of coping with emotions without using food is the fact that we now are giving ourselves full permission to eat what it is we're really wanting and what our body is wanting. And so that's not an issue anymore. And I feel like that's why, for me, I was able to release my emotional excess weight, even after having children. And it'll probably be a lifelong tendency. I don't know if it's genetic or whatever. I still catch myself sometimes eating more emotionally, but because I don't feel guilty about it anymore, I don't go on a full-out binge. I just feel a little fuller for a while, and because I give myself total, permission and unconditional love, there's no guilt there. I'm not thinking I need to diet the next day or restrict my calories the next day to balance myself out. It's just never an issue anymore. I don't gain weight when I do it. My body just naturally balances out, and so that's really exciting. Principle number 8 is to respect your body. So we are going to learn how to accept, bye sweetie. We're going to learn how to accept our body, our individual bodies, and our genetic blueprint, as they call it. Just as a person with a shoe size of 8 would not expect realistically to squeeze into a size 6, it is equally futile and uncomfortable to have a similar expectation about body size. Respect your body so you can feel better about who you are. It's hard to reject the diet mentality if you're unrealistic and overly critical of your body shape. And we can talk about all the ways in which we are influenced to be unhappy with our body shape and size. Media, obviously, is a huge one. But there are great exercises that you can even Google, how to love, or be comfortable in my own skin, or how to accept, my body for what it is. One that I find very commonly across the board is to regularly, every day, if you can, is just make it a ritual, a routine, as soon as you get out of the shower or whatever, before you dress and cover yourself up, to be able to look at yourself without judgment in the mirror and start telling yourself and forgiving yourself for the harshness that you've done to your body by dieting and by negative self-talk, and start saying I love you. And that might sound mushy if there are any men listening to this, but to say I love you, I am grateful for you. And what they suggest in here is that there's always at least one body part, even if it's your wrist or your ankle or your smile or your eyes. There are usually many body parts that people can fall in love with in themselves, and to start focusing on those rather than the unhappy body parts. And just remember, is it really worth it to agonize and stress over those things? Does anyone else in our life, or is their happiness contingent on our body being the perfect shape and size, or is their happiness actually contingent on our ability to love ourselves fully without judgment, so that we can love the people around us fully without judgment? And it's just really interesting when you think about how our internal dialogue affects our relationships with ourselves and with the people around us. And this is such a huge step in becoming an intuitive eater. If you are agonizing, you're trying to follow these principles, and you're still, shaming yourself for having extra rolls around your abdomen or this or that, whatever it is for you. If you're agonizing over those things, those will propel you to overeat. I've experienced that even as an intuitive eater now. There have been times where, just for whatever reason, I notice someone and I start getting back in that old pattern of comparing, and it never lasts long at all because I catch it right away. But if it happens, I'll notice that my ability to eat intuitively starts to get tampered with a little bit. And so this is really, really key to becoming an intuitive eater and reaching your natural weight, is to respect your body. Principle number 9, exercise to feel the difference. Okay. Says to forget militant exercise. How many of us have been caught in that of just, and honestly, I was never very disciplined, but I had many friends and people that I know that literally were militant exercisers. They could exercise for 2 hours every day, would not miss, even on a holiday. So it's saying to forget that, because that is the obsessive trying to lose weight, not happy with your body. I mean, once you become an intuitive eater, in this process you take a love to running or triathlons or whatever because it feels amazing, then great. That's something that I've noticed that I've really started enjoying running lately, but it has nothing to do with losing weight anymore. It's just because I love the endorphins and the feeling. So it says to just get active and feel the difference. Shift your focus to how it feels to move your body rather than the calorie burning effect of exercise. If you focus on how you feel from working out, such as energized, it can make the difference between rolling out of bed for a brisk morning walk or hitting the snooze alarm. If when you wake up your only goal is to lose weight, it's usually not a motivating factor in that moment of time. So our bodies are biologically created to move and to be active, and so to focus on that. And one thing that's especially key is to focus on what does actually feel good to you. So if you have not been exercising for a while, start really small. Start walking around the block or doing stretches on the carpet, and just start paying attention to what feels good to your body. And as you do that, and while implementing these other principles, you will find that your desire, your intrinsic motivation to start exercising for health just becomes automatic. It becomes natural. It's not a fight or a discipline issue. It is strictly because it comes from love and acceptance. And the last principle that we have is honoring your health. gentle nutrition. Make food choices that honor your health and taste buds while making you feel good. Remember that you don't have to eat a perfect diet to be healthy. You will not suddenly get a nutrient deficiency or gain weight from one snack, one meal, or one day of eating. It's what you eat consistently over time that matters. Progress, not perfection, is what counts. And they do, in here, encourage you not to skip forward to that chapter again like I was tempted to do, because before you get to the point where you naturally crave healthier foods that do actually give you more energy and more nutrition, you have to go through these other steps first to get there. And so I just encourage you to trust this process and take it to heart and just apply it. I mean, what do you have to lose in 3 months' time of rejecting the diet mentality just for once in your life? Try it this way and study these and implement them. Reach out if you have any questions. Reach out to one another, and I'm a firm believer that this can be a healing and amazingly powerful tool for everyone in the entire world. So that sums up those 2 chapters, and so that's that. So the next week we will be going over, for those of you who have your book, we will be going over chapters 4 and 5. So this is great. So next week we're actually going to get into the first principle, the whole chapter of it. We're going to be talking first about awakening the intuitive eater. That's a great one to look at because it talks about the stages that you have to go through, the natural sequence that you have to follow to adopt these principles. And then chapter 5 is going in depth on how to reject the diet mentality. So thank you so much for watching. Please, again, reach out to me if you have any questions. And the assignment, again, for this webinar, and I'll post it on the group page, is to identify what kind of eating personality you typically are or identify with. And that was pretty much it. And observe it unconditionally. Okay, you guys have a great night, and we will see you next week. Thank you.